My name is Elara Quinn, and I used to think being the strong one in the family was a gift, a virtue, a role I was born for. I didn't complain. I didn't fall apart. And I sure as hell didn't say no when someone needed help. But strength, real strength, it isn't about how much weight you can carry. It's about knowing when to drop the things that are breaking your back and walking away. And it took me 10 years to figure that out. 10 years of being their emergency fund. Their backup plan. Their silent solution to every mess they made. They didn't even ask most of the time. They just took. They used words like family, like loyalty, like we raised you to wrap the theft in something soft. But make no mistake, what they did wasn't love. It was slow, deliberate theft wrapped in a hug. And when I finally stood up, when I finally said enough, they didn't apologize. They screamed. They blamed, and then wani, tur jen. They broke, but let me start at the moment. It all cracked, because all stories have a moment like that. A hinge, a spark, a final straw no one notices until the match is already lit. It was a Tuesday, ordinary in the way most important days are. I had just gotten out of a client presentation, 12 hours of prepping data for a team that barely glanced at it before moving on to lunch. I was drained, starving, and already calculating whether I had enough left in me to cook or just eat cereal. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Lauren na isong sommichiti arnsiers chanes. It was a photo, a red Lexus, fresh off the lot, wrapped in a giant white bow like a damn birthday present from the gods. And the caption, look what mom and dad helped me get. Feeling like a boss, BTCH today. My mouth went dry. Because that bow, it was tied with my name. I knew that because 30 minutes earlier, I'd gotten a notification from the bank. An unusual withdrawal from the family's shared emergency account. A 42 chales, 0 wire transfer. The same emergency account I had funded for over a decade. Birthdays skipped, vacations deferred. All so they'd have something to fall back on. And Lauren, who never held a job longer than 6 months. Who left college with debt and no degree. Who lived like every day was a music video had just used that account for a down payment. I stared at the photo so long the screen dimmed. Then I drove to my parents' house. The driveway was glowing with pride. My parents stood beside the car, champagne glasses in hand like they'd won the lottery. Lauren spun in circles, squealing like she'd just been crowned prom queen of the planet. They didn't see me walk up. They didn't see the way my hands were clenched so tightly. The keys bit into my palm. All they saw was the girl who always fixed everything. Elara, Mom chirped, waving. Isn't it stunning? Lauren's first real investment. I looked at her, April Quinn, the woman who raised me with equal parts duty and manipulation. Her hair was perfect. Her smile, plastic. Her eyes, calculating. Where'd the money come from? I asked. Lauren rolled her eyes. Don't start. I am starting, I said, low and steady. Tell me where the money came from. Dad spoke next. Walter, retired early, spent his mornings golfing and his afternoons asking me to check if his pension could stretch a little more. Sweetheart, relax. It's just a small advance from the emergency fund. She needs a car to get to her job interviews. She doesn't have any interviews. I said, blinking. She hasn't worked in months. Mom stepped forward. Elash, don't ruin this. Lauren needed help. You always say we're a team. Well, sometimes the team helps each other. I've been helping for 10 years. I said, my voice cracked. 10 years of overdraft notices, skipped holidays, and pretending it was all fine. And you never once asked, oh, please. Lauren snapped. You make 6 figures. You'll recover. You always do. You're good with money. I said, reaching into my bag and pulling out my phone, until I checked this morning. After the Lexus and the champagne and the celebration, I have $88 left in my account. The silence was thick. Then Dad chuckled that bitter, condescending sound I knew too well. You're being dramatic. We all sacrifice for each other. No. I said, I sacrifice. You just spend, And that was the moment I realized they didn't see what they did as theft. They saw it as entitlement. They had rewritten the story in their heads so that I owed them. Because I was the responsible one. The successful one. The one who could always absorb another hit. But that day, I decided the story was going to change. Because being strong doesn't mean being used. Being loving doesn't mean being stolen from. And family doesn't mean financial servitude. So I stepped back, looked them all in the eye, and said 3 words I had never said before. It's over now. I opened the banking app, hit transfer funds, then close account, confirmed every step. The emergency fund, gone. The linked account they siphoned from without permission, closed. The credit line I co-signed with my father when I was 23, and too naive to read the fine print, frozen. Mom gasped. You can't. I just did, Elara. Dad's voice rose, but it wasn't anger. It was panic. You don't understand what this means. Our payments, the credit cards, the house. I understand perfectly. I said, you built your life on my shoulders, and now the floor is gone. I walked away as they shouted behind me. I didn't turn around. Because when someone's been using you like an ATM, the only thing that shuts them up is when the machine finally powers down. I got in my car, hands shaking, and drove to the only person who would understand. Mason. He was waiting at his kitchen table, already pouring whiskey. Former forensic accountant turned private consultant. He'd warned me years ago, told me to watch the accounts, to separate finances, to run, and I hadn't listened. Until now. I need your help, I said, sliding my laptop across the table. It's worse than I thought. He scrolled for 5 minutes before saying anything. Then he looked up. Elara, this isn't just bad. This is criminal. I exhaled. Then let's start building the case. And that's how it began. Not with a scream. Not with a fight. But with a button, a closed account, and a decision. Not to fix them. Not to protect them, but to finally protect myself. The first thing Mason did was map it out. A digital spiderweb, glowing with red lines on his screen, like veins from a bleeding wound. Each thread told a story I never meant to write. 350 here, he said, pointing to the screen. Auto-debited every other month, always disguised as utilities. But the account it goes to belongs to your father. I blinked. He clicked again. $980 monthly, labeled as family support, or traced to an insurance policy under your sister's name. Guess whose card funded it? I stared. Yours, he said. Of course. And this, his voice dropped as he highlighted a long list of recurring charges. Private school tuition. My mind slammed back in time. Senior year. Lauren's miracle scholarship to a private academy she swore changed her life. My parents said it was a blessing, said we should be proud. I was proud. But apparently, I also paid for it. You've been paying since you were 22, Mason said quietly. 7 years? Without knowing it, a low heat filled my chest, not fire. But something slower, darker. The heat of betrayal aging like whiskey. How many holidays had I smiled across that table while they let me believe I was free? How many birthdays did they toast with the money they took from my account? I swallowed hard. What do we do now? Mason leaned forward, his voice clear. You document? You report. You protect your name like it's the last thing they haven't stolen yet. So I did. We printed records. I wrote timelines. Every loan I never signed. Every charge I never approved. By midnight, my living room looked like a war room spreadsheets. Highlighted statements, manila folders stuffed with what used to be my blind generosity. And in the quiet between tasks, my phone buzzed. Lauren, you ruined everything. The car's in default. They're saying it'll be repossessed. I needed that car, Elara. I needed it for my future. I stared at the text like it was a message from another planet. Somewhere in her mind, I was the villain, not the account holder she robbed, not the sister whose dreams were pawned for hers. Just the problem, just the one who stopped playing the game. Mason read over my shoulder. They'll guilt you, gaslight you, promise to change. It's all part of the pattern. I nodded, deleting the message. That night, I slept on the floor, not because I didn't have a bed, but because something in me needed the cold. The discomfort. The truth. For the first time in years, I didn't carry anyone else's burdens to sleep. In the morning, I filed the first report. Identity theft, fraud, forgery. I attached the bank statements, the forged documents. The timeline, the weight of it felt biblical. That afternoon, I got a call from a woman named Claire Niles. Detective, Financial Crimes Unit. Her voice was cool. Professional. We've received your filing. And I have to be honest, it's one of the clearest cases of familial financial abuse I've seen in years. I didn't know whether to be proud or sick. She continued. Miss Quinn, are you prepared to press charges against your parents and your sister? I thought about Lauren's latest post, her red Lexus, her fake job interviews, her bikini vacation captioned, work hard. Play harder? I thought about my mother's voice saying, Elara, you always find a way. You're so good at bouncing back. Like being resilient made me a target. Yes, I said into the phone, I'm ready. That night, I received a voicemail from my mother. Her voice was calm. Controlled, the voice of a PR campaign, not a parent. Elara, this is getting out of hand. Whatever anger you're feeling, let's discuss it like a family. Don't do anything you'll regret. Regret? No. Mom, regret was giving you my trust and watching you convert it into a lifestyle you never earned. Regret was saying yes too many times when I should have asked why. By day 3, the bank had frozen their accounts. The house loan went into default. Lauren's car was listed for repossession, and the messages turned desperate. Dad's blood pressure is up. He's in the ERs. You're killing him with this. Your sister is depressed. She hasn't eaten since yesterday. She's sobbing. What kind of person does this to their family? We gave you everything. We made you, and this is how you repay us. But they never once said, we're sorry. And that was when I knew this wasn't about misunderstanding. This was a pattern, and now the pattern was cracking. The 4th night, I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset paint my city gold. Mason joined me with 2 cups of coffee. They won't stop, he said quietly, not unless something forces them to. I nodded. That's why I need to see it through. He looked at me, really looked. You're not just freezing accounts anymore. Elara, you're rewriting your story. And he was right, because every account I closed was a chapter ending. Every signature I revoked was a page torn free from their control. Every dollar I reclaimed wasn't just money. It was power. I was done being the background character in my own life. I was ready to be the author. The subpoena arrived on a Thursday morning stamped sealed and full of weight. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. I wasn't scared. Not exactly. It just made everything real. This wasn't just a falling out. Not just family drama. This was felony fraud, identity theft, criminal misuse of my name, my trust. My financial lifeline. Detective Claire Niles called an hour later. The district attorney's office is moving forward. She said, your case is airtight. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the undertone of something deeper. Pity. Maybe, or awe. She handled white-collar crimes, everyday embezzlement. Scams. Schemes. But this wasn't just theft from a stranger. This was betrayal from the people who were supposed to protect me. Claire paused. Do you understand the magnitude of what you've started? I looked around my apartment, the one I paid for, with every late night, every ignored vacation, every holiday spent alone because I had to work. Yes, I said, and I'm not turning back. That evening, I drove by my parents' house. I didn't stop, just watched from across the street. The Lexus was gone. The front lawn was overgrown. The lights in the living room were off, but the television flickered behind the curtains. They were still pretending things were normal. Even now, I wondered if they sat in silence, or if they blamed me loudly over dinner. I wondered if Lauren still cried in that high-pitched wail that used to get her everything she wanted. If Mom still poured her wine into the teacup when she wanted to look composed. If Dad still said, "It's just a rough patch." Sweetheart, rough patches don't last 10 years. Rough patches don't have forged documents and fake signatures. This wasn't a patch. It was a pattern. The next morning, Helen called. Realtor, best friend, my anchor when I couldn't find my breath. I found something. She said, "There's a house on the East End. It's newer, safer, and it has a garden." A garden? I asked, already smiling. "You said you wanted one." She said, "Some place to grow your own peas." I laughed. It was the first real laugh in weeks. We toured the house that afternoon. White walls, tall windows, hardwood floors that didn't creak when you walked. The kind of place that felt untouched by lies. Like it didn't know my story yet, but it was willing to be part of the next chapter. I want it. I said, without hesitation, "You can afford it now," Helen said, "because you're not supporting 3 other adults." That night, I sent my final response to Lauren's barrage of messages. It was just one sentence. Start over, like I had to only this time, without stealing someone else's life. Then I blocked her number, blocked my mother, blocked my father. It was a strange kind of silence afterward, but it wasn't empty. It was clean, and in that stillness, I got to work. With Mason's help, I compiled every trace of evidence files, screen recordings, digital paper trails. We found accounts I never knew existed, ones opened using my SSN, email addresses I didn't own, utility bills in my name for apartments I'd never lived in. They didn't just use me. They built a life on my name like it was spare lumber. Like I was just scaffolding for their version of the American dream. And while they dined, traveled, and posted photos with hashtags like grateful and family first, I was working 12-hour days to clean up messes I never made. That realization didn't make me cry. It made me furious, and fury, and thumbs. When disciplined, becomes something else. It becomes purpose. The DA's office called. "We're moving to arraignment." They said, "We'll be serving arrest warrants by Monday." My hands clenched around the phone. Monday. That was 3 days away. 3 days until the illusion cracked like a frozen lake. I didn't know how they'd react. Would Dad deny everything? Would Mom cry on cue? Would Lauren scream betrayal into the wind? I didn't care, because it wasn't about them anymore. It was about the girl I used to be, the one who skipped buying a dress for prom because Lauren needed new shoes. The one who worked 2 jobs in college because Dad forgot to pay her tuition. The one who thought being loved meant being useful, and being useful meant being broke. That girl deserved justice, and I was going to give it to her. On Sunday night, I sat alone in my apartment, lit only by the soft glow of my laptop. Mason was on the couch, half asleep, watching the news with one eye open. Helen sent a photo from the new house she'd already bought a welcome mat. It said, "Peace lives here now." I stared at it until tears blurred my vision. Not because I was sad, but because I knew, deep down, I was almost free. Monday came like thunder. Early morning, a knock on my door. Not the police, not yet. It was Justin, my boss, unshaven, eyes tired but kind. He didn't say hello, just stepped inside and handed me a folder. "She used you as a reference again," he said. My throat tightened. Lauren," he nodded. "Applied to 4 firms last week. Said she had a finance degree. Claimed 5 years of experience at our company. Said you trained her." My stomach turned. Justin pulled out a form. "This is her application. She signed your name, faked the phone number. I got a call this morning asking about your little sister protege." That's when I knew something was off. I stared at the folder. My name scribbled in handwriting that tried to look like mine. She used my name again. I whispered, even while the walls were closing in. "She's desperate." Justin said, "And reckless, and criminal," I added. He nodded. "I've already filed a report with HR and forwarded everything to the authorities. You might want to include it in your case." I looked up at him. "Do you think I'm doing the right thing?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he said, "Do you remember what I told you in your first interview?" I nodded. That you wanted people here who could see danger coming before it exploded. And that's what you did. He said, "You saw the bomb they'd buried under your life, and instead of stepping over it, you disarmed it. With precision, even if it meant arresting my family, especially then." He said, "Because that's what risk analysts do, we protect what matters. And sometimes what matters most is ourselves." That afternoon, I got the call. Detective Claire's voice was sharper now. Focused. "It's done." She said, "The arrests happened an hour ago. We have them in custody." I didn't speak. "Your mother cried." She added, "Your father demanded a lawyer, and your sister." "What about Lauren?" "She screamed your name. Called you a traitor, said you were jealous." A bitter laugh escaped me. Jealous of what? The dead. The lies. The years I spent cleaning up behind them while they built their fantasy life. I wasn't jealous. I was done. Claire continued, "They're being processed now. Arraignment tomorrow. But there's more. Your family listed you as a co-signer on multiple active loans. One of the banks has opened an investigation into the documents the signatures don't match. They've also flagged your father for pension fraud." Pension fraud. I remembered helping him fill out those early retirement forms, him saying, "Just sign here. It's a formality." It was never a formality. It was a trap. That night, I drove to Helen's office. She was standing in the doorway, holding 2 glasses of wine. "Congratulations," she said softly. "I didn't win anything," I replied. "You did," she insisted. "You won yourself back." She handed me the keys to the new house. I stood there, the metal cool in my hand, the weight of it sinking into my palm like truth. I don't know if I feel happy. I said, "You're not supposed to..." She replied, "You're supposed to feel clean." That night, I walked through every room of the house, alone, no voices. No guilt. No gaslighting. Just space, and silence, and me. I opened the back door to the small garden and stood in the moonlight. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just breathed, deep, slow, grounded. This was mine. Bought with truth, not lies. Earned, not taken. It was strange how empty peace feels after a storm. But it wasn't the kind of empty that aches. It was the kind that waits. Waits to be filled. With something real. Something earned. Something sacred. The courthouse smelled like paper, old wood, and stories no one wanted to tell out loud. That morning, I dressed carefully. No drama, no revenge fantasy outfit, just clean lines. Calm colors power without shouting. Mason waited outside security with a legal pad and the confidence of someone who'd seen empires fall behind spreadsheets. Helen held a coffee in one hand and a folder in the other, her version of armor. "I printed your victim statement," she whispered. "Every word still hits." I nodded, my throat too dry to thank her. We stepped inside. My parents were already seated at the defense table. Matching gray suits, matching expressions, somewhere between shame and strategy. Lauren sat behind them. No tears today, just hollow eyes and clenched hands. The mascara smudges were gone. This was her courtroom face, for once. They didn't look like a family. They looked like defendants. The judge entered. Everyone rose, and then it began. April and Walter Quinn are charged with multiple counts of fraud, including identity theft, forgery, financial abuse, and misappropriation of funds. Lauren Quinn faces separate charges related to falsified job applications, credit card fraud, and loan forgery. The list felt endless. But I knew the real sentence had already been served. I served it for 10 years, unpaid, unacknowledged. The bailiff called my name. I stepped up with the victim statement in my hands that had carried everyone else's mistakes for far too long. Your Honor. I began, "I'm not here because I want to be..." I'm here because I have to be. I looked directly at my parents. For years, I thought family meant giving everything. My time, my money, my future. I paid for braces I never wore, cars I never drove, schools I never attended. I co-signed loans I didn't understand. I said yes when I should have asked why. I believed that love meant sacrifice. My eyes drifted to Lauren. But love doesn't forge signatures. It doesn't drain accounts while smiling across the dinner table. It doesn't lie and gaslight and cry on cue to avoid consequences. I paused, then added slowly. And love doesn't call you jealous after it steals your life. The courtroom was silent. Even the judge looked shaken. I'm not asking for vengeance, I said. I'm asking for accountability. Because if we don't name what's broken, we can't heal it. And if we don't stop what's stolen, it never stops. I stepped back, sat down. The judge turned to my parents. You may speak before sentencing. My father stood, Your Honor. We were only trying to help our daughter Lauren. She needed us. She's been struggling. Elara always had more. We just thought she'd understand. And there it was. The truth wrapped in poison. They thought I wouldn't mind. They thought I could take it. They thought my strength meant they could carve pieces off me until I was hollow and I'd still smile for the family photo. The judge nodded slowly. Help, he said, is not theft. Sacrifice is not obligation. And fraud is still fraud, even if committed at a dinner table. He looked at the clock, then down at the files. For the crimes committed, I sentence Walter and April Quinn to 5 years in state prison, eligible for parole after 3. I also order full restitution for damages, including identity restoration costs and emotional damages. Lauren Quinn, for your part, you will serve 2 years with probation eligibility based on employment and behavior compliance. Lauren screamed. This isn't fair. I needed that car. I needed a future. You took my future, I said quietly, not rising. Now you can earn your own. The bailiff cuffed them one by one. Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. Dad looked smaller than I remembered. Lauren shouted as they led her away. You're dead to me, Elara. You betrayed your own blood. I didn't flinch, because I had already buried that version of myself. The one who lived on breadcrumbs and guilt, and she was gone. Outside the courtroom, reporters waited. One of them leaned into the mics. Elara, do you have anything to say to others in similar situations? I paused, then spoke, softly but clearly. Yes, stop calling it love when it's theft. Stop calling it family when it's fraud. You are not a villain for saying no. You are not heartless for choosing yourself. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. Click, flash, silence. Later that night, Helen poured champagne in the new kitchen. Mason lit a candle on the counter like we were celebrating a birthday, the birth of a life reclaimed. To freedom, he said. To clarity, Helen added. To peace, I whispered. My phone buzzed. A text from a blocked number tried to come through. I didn't open it. Didn't need to. Their voices no longer lived in my head. Their needs were no longer louder than my own. I turned off the phone and walked outside into the garden. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Not mine, not anymore. I leaned down, pressed my fingers into the soil, and whispered to the earth. This is where I grow, this time. For me, spring arrived like a breath I didn't know I was holding. The old life faded like smoke legal paperwork now filed. Debt reclaimed, silence thick where guilt used to live. My new house felt less like shelter and more like sanctuary. The floors didn't creak from secrets. The walls didn't echo with apologies never spoken. And my name, Elara Quinn, finally belonged to me again. The banks corrected their records. My credit was restored. The insurance company reversed the co-signed damages and removed me from any future liability. And the courts issued a restraining order against all 3 of them. But it wasn't the paperwork that healed me. It was the mornings. Coffee in a quiet kitchen. Emails that weren't laced with panic. Laughter with Helen and Mason that didn't feel like rebellion, just joy. And there, in the heart of it all, was something I hadn't felt in years. Stillness. I used to mistake peace for boredom. Now, I knew the truth. Peace is the absence of dread. It's choosing yourself in a world that taught you to choose everyone else. One morning, as I trimmed the hedges in my tiny backyard, I got a message from the detective. Thought you'd want to see this. It was a photo, a still frame from courthouse security footage. Lauren was being escorted by her lawyer after violating her probation. Apparently, she'd forged a new application again using my credentials. I didn't even flinch, didn't reply, because karma wasn't mine to deliver anymore. I had already done my part. I let go of that weight, just like I let go of the emergency fund I once funded with my whole future. I built a new one, quietly. With intention, but this time, I was the only name on it. One night, I sat with Mason under the garden lights. We talked about Edison, how he failed over 1,000 times before inventing the light bulb. 10 years? Mason said, they stole from you for 10 years. That's 1,000 days of failure. And still you lit the fuse on your freedom. I didn't light it, I said. I became the fire. He smiled. You know, he said, swirling his drink. You could help a lot of people with this story. I tilted my head. Not everyone sees abuse when it's wearing a birthday hat and calling itself family. He continued. You lived it. Maybe it's time to speak. The thought had never occurred to me. Not fully. All I had wanted was to survive. Now, I had something bigger, a voice, a truth, a fire I could hand to someone else standing in the dark. That week, I said yes to a speaking engagement, a small conference on financial abuse and identity theft. I stood on stage in front of 30 people who looked like I used to tired, hopeful, ashamed to say what they knew was happening, and I told them everything. The Lexus, the fake accounts, the tears that came only when the money stopped flowing. I told them about growing up believing love and sacrifice were the same thing until the day I realized that love doesn't come with terms and invoices. The room was quiet when I finished. One woman stood up. She was maybe 50, strong shoulders, trembling hands. I thought I was crazy. She said, my son uses my credit cards. He says I owe him for raising him alone. I thought maybe he was right. I looked her in the eye. No, he isn't. Love gives freely, but it doesn't demand endlessly. You can forgive someone and still press charges. You can love someone and still protect yourself from them. Both things can be true. She nodded, and just like that, I saw it in her face. The shift. The beginning. That night, I drove home with the windows down, the wind curling through my hair like a soft reminder. This is what real freedom feels like. It doesn't ask for apologies. It doesn't beg to be understood. It just exists. Full, quiet, unapologetic. A few weeks later, I received a certified letter. My parents were up for parole review. They were asking me to write a letter to the judge, something to soften the image. Reduce the sentence. The envelope also contained a handwritten note from my mother. It said, Elara, we were only trying to help the family. You always had more. We thought you'd understand. Please don't let this be the end of us. I read it once. Then I wrote my reply. To whom it may concern, April and Walter Quinn committed financial fraud, identity theft, and personal betrayal over a span of more than 10 years. Their actions were not isolated mistakes. They were a pattern of abuse built on assumption and enabled by guilt. They did not stop until the law made them, and even now, they show remorse only in the shadow of consequence. I do not seek revenge. I seek truth. And the truth is this. They had a choice, over and over, and each time, they chose themselves over integrity, over decency, and over me. I will not be writing in favor of reduced sentencing. Because actions have consequences, and for once, they must learn that lesson. Elara Quinn. I mailed it the next day. No hesitation. No guilt. Just clarity. Because when you finally stop carrying the weight of everyone else's mistakes, you start to see how tall you really are. The parole board denied their request. The letter came 3 weeks later, stamped, sealed. Final, no reduction. no early release. My parents would serve out their sentence. Lauren's probation was extended due to another violation involving falsified bank statements and a burner phone linked to new identity fraud. I read the news over breakfast, then folded the paper and moved on with my day. No spike of adrenaline, no cold sweat, no giddy rush of vindication, just a quiet nod from the universe. This is what happens when you stop apologizing for protecting yourself. And then real life began again. I hosted my first dinner in the new house. Mason made his famous garlic bread. Helen brought a lemon tart that collapsed slightly in the middle. We laughed until we cried. Not the kind of tears I used to know, the ones born from exhaustion, shame, and holding in too much for too long. These were the kind of tears that washed you clean. Do you ever think about them? Helen asked that night as we cleaned up dishes, soft jazz humming in the background. Sometimes, I admitted, drying a wine glass. Not out of regret, just wonder, like how I ever thought that was normal. She nodded. It wasn't your fault. You know, she said. I know, I whispered, but healing doesn't mean forgetting. Healing means remembering without relapsing. And I had no intention of ever stepping back into that old story. Because now, I was writing my own. The speaking engagement turned into 3 more, then 5, then a national conference. I stood before rooms filled with strangers, most of them carrying invisible bruises shaped like bank accounts, forged documents, and silent guilt. I told them everything. I didn't sugarcoat it. I didn't vilify them either, because I knew too well that most of us don't walk into these situations with our eyes closed. We walk in wide-eyed, full of hope that this time, they'll change, that if we love a little harder, give a little more, things will balance out. But leeches don't stop because you love them. They stop when you pull them off and show them your skin is no longer theirs to feed on. I met a young man after one of the events. He was 19, eyes too tired for someone that young. He'd been working 2 jobs since 16 while his father took out payday loans in his name. I thought it was just how families worked. He said, I squeezed his hand. No, it's how control works. And now that you see it, you get to break it. I became the person I once needed, and that became my real paycheck. But even with the wins, the restored credit, the clean accounts, the new career, the biggest shift happened the day I bought my dream painting. It was this abstract piece, a swirling mess of reds, blacks, and a golden streak cutting through the center. It reminded me of myself, chaos interrupted by clarity. I hung it above my fireplace, and every time I passed it, I smiled. Not because it was expensive, but because I bought it with money I earned for me, not to cover someone else's mistake, not to rescue anyone. Just because I loved it, freedom isn't loud. It doesn't parade down the streets screaming victory. It whispers at midnight when you sleep without anxiety. It smiles in the mirror when you no longer need validation. It lives in bank statements that are finally yours, in coffee sipped slowly, in gardens grown with your own hands, in knowing that you no longer exist as someone else's plan B. Sometimes, I still get messages, blocked numbers that sneak through. Letters from people who once said I was heartless, now begging for reconnection. I don't read them anymore, because I already answered the most important question. What does it cost to reclaim your life? Everything they were never willing to give you. But it's worth it. Every boundary drawn, every no spoken, every tear shed in secret, every dollar taken, and everyone reclaimed. They thought they broke me, but all they did was build me. Out of fire, out of grace, out of the unshakable truth that the strongest ones are not the loudest. They're the ones who walk away without burning the bridge, because they know they'll never need to cross it again. So now I wake up to a quiet house, with locks I control, accounts that carry only my name, and a future that stretches wide clear, unscripted, and finally mine. They used me like an ATM for 10 years, and when I froze every account, they thought I was cruel, but I wasn't being cruel. I was being free, and freedom is not vengeance. Freedom is choosing yourself without permission, and never, ever apologizing for it again.